Have you ever thought about your soul, that inner compass within you that is always there, never changing? Do you battle with trusting your soul versus listening to your mind? What is the difference of the two, anyways? These are really heavy questions that can make your brain literally hurt if you think about them for too long. Trust me, my friends, I know. I can get in the weeds of these questions, which is why I'm lucky to have a friend like Natalie who is willing to get in the weeds with me and talk through these heavy questions. Natalie is the founder of FitSoul, a company based around helping women align with their souls and get out of their own way. Natalie's journey did not start out easy, but it was through the pain that growth emerged, and she realized what it was like to align with her soul, find her worth, and love herself. You're listening to the Cultivating Curiosity podcast, where everyone has a story to share. This is the story of Natalie Rodriguez. Hello, Natalie. How are you?
I am so good. Hi, how you doing?
Good.
It's great to connect with you.
Oh, no, I know. I'm so happy that you're on the show today. I know we were talking before the show started that your story has resonated with me for so long, and I've been wanting to talk to you for so long, and I'm excited to share your message with all of the listeners today. Thank you so much for spending your time with us.
Of course, I'm super, super excited. And, that's kind of why I do what I do and why I share the things that I share so vulnerably, especially on social media. Because I'm like, you know what, if somebody else can relate, if it can help somebody else, like even if it's just one person,
Yeah.
that's my job is done.
Yeah, no, and you do such a great job of being so vulnerable. And I think it's perfect that you mention Instagram because clearly this is our first time talking, but I felt a connection with you before even speaking face to face like this because of how vulnerable and real you are on Instagram. And I want to actually start off our conversation by quoting your Instagram bio because I think it's so relevant to what we're going to be talking about today and who you are as a person. So you say in your Instagram bio, I help women connect with their soul, stop doubting their worth, and get out of their own way. Like, wow, that is absolutely amazing. Like, what a mission and what a purpose to have in life. Natalie, what happened in your life, or take me through your life that has led you to this purpose in your life?
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you so much for that. That's a really sweet way to put it. But yeah, so I mean, I don't even know where to start because there are so many things that led me to that point. And I always think that, even when we are in the thick of like really difficult moments and we don't know where we're going to end up, I think there were so many of those that led to where I'm at, even if I thought, even if I didn't understand it at the time. And really, if I go back to the beginning, when I was around 12-ish years old, like junior high age, I was bullied really bad for my weight and just for my looks in general. And it was really tough because that's also the age that you start to get interested in like, interested in like relationships and there's hormones and there's things happening and you're just like, oh, so, I had like, anytime that I started to really get to know myself, or so I thought at that age, which I don't even really know. We know what that means at that age, but I was bullied for my weight. I was bullied for how I looked, and it was really tough because even people who I thought were my friends at one point would join in with the bullies. And I know that it's really hard because at that time you're also trying to fit in. So I can't even blame my little friends because they didn't even know. They're like just trying to be cool,
Yeah.
But it was really scarring because, like I said, that's the time that you're trying to find yourself. You're trying to fit in. You're trying to be cool. And I was called names like pig, cow. I was made fun of and it's weird because I look back at it and I don't think I look like, even as a kid, like I was a chunky kid, but I wouldn't say those things,
Yeah,
So it's so interesting
not.
how kids can be mean and how it does leave a scar. So I would really say that it started there because by the time I was 13, I was so depressed and it affected me to the core, to the point where I was thinking of taking my own life. Like I was that depressed.
Wow.
I remember going on my computer at home, and at the time we had like the big desktop computers that everybody in my house shared. And I feel like I've always really liked writing. Like I think that was a way for me to vent. And I wrote a letter that, sounded like it was like a suicide note, and my parents read it. and they were just freaked out. And of course they took me to like counselors, and that was really the beginning of what helped me start to discover myself. But it's been
Mm-hmm.
a long journey. And after that, there's been a ton of things that have happened since then. Like, because I didn't love myself, I got into relationships that weren't healthy, and I kept looking for love outside myself. I
Mm-hmm.
kept thinking weight loss was the answer, because if I had the body, or I had the books, then, everything would fix itself and I would feel good about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And the next biggest moment that led me to where I'm at, because I'm skipping a bunch of stuff, it's just way too long. But the next biggest moment that brought me to where I'm at now is that in my early 20s, I was diagnosed with a precancerous condition. And the reality is that to a certain degree, we're all precancerous, because if we don't have it, you're precancerous. But in my particular case, I had cells that were already showing changes.
Oh,
And
wow.
so my doctors were like, well, we can treat this way and we can do this. And it just freaked me out. And I didn't
Mm-hmm.
want to make any decisions that day. So I asked my doctor, I said, what are my options, and how soon, if this were to become cancer, how soon or how much time do I have, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so my doctor was like, well, it's really hard to tell. It's different for everybody. And, it could be 1 year, it could be 10 years, or it could be that it never becomes cancer. And I was like, well, those are really interesting odds. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you even decide what to do, right? But I've always been very much into holistic care.
Mm-hmm.
So I left the doctor's office that day, and that weekend, by no accident, I came across a friend of mine who was reading a book called Clean. And I don't know if you've heard of it.
I haven't,
Um,
no.
it's by a cardiologist called, his name is Dr. Alexander Junger.
Okay.
And he has this whole book about how your body's supposed to heal itself. It just doesn't, because of all the toxins in our food, in our water, in our environment, in our thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
energetically.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, this is interesting that literally like the day after I get this
Yeah.
diagnosis, I run into this book.
There
So
is no
immediately,
coincidence in life. That was meant to happen, right?
absolutely. And this is why I say, like, sometimes it's not until you look back that you're like,
Mm-hmm.
that's really interesting that happened that way. It can't be a coincidence.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and I really think that everybody gets these signs or these like nudges.
Mm-hmm.
It's just if you're open to them or if you understand them that way. Um,
Absolutely.
so this book, immediately, of course, I like buy it, download it, and like I'm reading it. And there was a 21-day like detox, which I really hate using that word. That's a whole
Mm-hmm.
other a whole other conversation. Um, but just because I've had such a negative relationship with food for like my entire life as a result of getting bullied and body
Mm-hmm.
image issues,
Mm-hmm.
that things like detox and diet and like cleanse, I kind of had issues with those words. But anyway, there was a detox in the book that the sole purpose of it was to get your body back on your side,
Mm-hmm.
your body back to healing the way that it's supposed to heal,
Mm-hmm.
without any like obstacle, meaning the stuff we eat. And like part of the book too talks about how much energy goes to digestion and how that prevents you from healing as well. So anyhow, I followed this for, I believe it was 27 days, because it was a 21-day cleanse, and I did it for like almost like a week extra.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I was realizing that I was at a job that was like super toxic, that I wasn't super happy at anymore. I was in a relationship that I should have left a long time before that. Um, and obviously, when we're talking about health in your body and symptoms that come up, part of that too is energetically, like if you are unhappy, if you're miserable, if you're having negative thoughts, if
Mm-hmm.
you're not in alignment with your soul.
Yeah.
So I realized at the time that I was changing my diet, and I ended up leaving this job because I was just miserable. That relationship ended, and every 6 months I still went back to get tested while I was doing all these things. I started meditating, started like journaling more. Mind you, I didn't have another job when I left my job.
Okay.
It was just like I knew I could not be there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Within a year of me really focusing on myself and removing all the things that were toxic, whether it be food or work or relationships,
Mm-hmm.
within a year, all my test results were normal
Wow.
without any medical intervention. And I was like, that's
Oh,
very
that's so
interesting,
phenomenal to me. That's amazing.
right? That's exactly how I felt, where I was like, wait a second. Like, you mean to tell me that I have some control over what happens to me.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and I do believe that there's a time and a place for medicine and for doctors and all of
Mhm.
that. I do believe
Mhm.
that. But, when we talk about how anything starts energetically, your health is no exception, right? Like whenever you start to develop symptoms, okay, well, what got you there?
Yeah.
And how long have you been in the situation that got you there?
Mhm.
So I had been at this job for like a while after I had been miserable. I had been in this relationship for a while after I knew I had left. I had been
Mhm.
like even with food, but at the time I drastically changed everything. And once I got those test results, I was like, you know what? I've always had this passion for helping women specifically. And
Mhm.
even at the time, I was like, you know what? Women need to know that they can take control of their health and happiness. And that's
Absolutely.
really what like started the whole FitSoul thing that's now,
Mhm.
I mean, that was back in 2012 or before 2012. Um, and since then, many other things have happened as life tends to do,
Mhm. Oh, yes.
um, where my brand has evolved, but that is where FitSoul was born
Wow.
in a sense. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff that goes into it, like the body image thing,
Yeah.
where I realized that even though I had done all that work and I had healed myself and all that, I still had this missing link of I didn't fully love myself and I still thought I had to lose weight and I still thought I
Mm.
had to lose weight to attract a partner and for to keep that partner.
Mhm.
And the fit soul thing came really, really strongly for me, like that message and that intention to help other women with this because I realized how much importance we place on how we look and
Yeah.
how hard we like punish ourselves with like dieting and exercise and all these things trying to love ourselves.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, that's not even where it's at, like
Mhm.
at all.
I think it's so powerful that your company, FitSoul, has evolved over these last, 8 years now with
Yeah.
you. Like you started FitSoul, your company, as a completely different woman. And as FitSoul has evolved, you have evolved as well in knowing your worth and loving yourself and accepting yourself for who you are. I think that that's beautiful.
Thank you. And you know what, as you say that, it's so interesting because I don't know that I've ever really realized it. I just thought like, oh, let me shift this.
Mm-hmm.
But in retrospect, the other thing that's actually really interesting about that is that in every phase of my life, I feel that that fits whole message has become stronger with what
Mm-hmm.
I've gone through.
Mm-hmm.
And every time something happens and every time I evolve, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
no, this is why I need to do FitSoul. Like, this is why it's much more important. Like, even now being pregnant, I'm like, oh my God, like, I want my little girl to love herself. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So it's like, I don't want her to be thinking that it's all in her body or to think that she's some like sexual object as women are often, in society or whatever. Um, so every phase has just confirmed to me more that I am on the right path and that this is something I'm meant to be doing. Because the name, like
Absolutely.
I said, the name FitSoul I came up with it like back in 2012. And every time that something happens or I grow or evolve,
Yeah.
I'm like, yep, this is what it is.
I love the name FitSoul, by the way. I think it is
Thank
so
you.
powerful. It speaks for itself, first of all, but I think it's a beautiful reminder for people who are going through difficult times and uncomfortable times that those moments are there to teach you the biggest lessons in life and, in a way, strengthen your soul, which is the whole mission around FitSoul. It's
Yeah,
beautiful. So, I want to
thank
ask
you.
you, this is a question that I think will be the biggest question of all questions we talk about today because it can be interpreted in so many different ways. But what is your definition of the soul?
So to me, it is, to put it simply, it is your inner life force that is also connected or has a divine nature.
Mm-hmm.
It is beyond your human form. It is the energy that gives you life. It is the thing in you that, another way that I look at it is your internal GPS.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were all born with this life force that has a sense of direction,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so many times we get disconnected from it because at the end of the day, we came into this human body,
Yeah.
and we have to learn to navigate the ego and the human part of
Mm-hmm.
it. But at the end of it, I really think it's all about just remembering who you really are, which is this soul, this life force that has an internal GPS system for you, that has this sense of guidance if you just sit down and listen to it.
Yeah, that's something that I've been learning the past few years because my whole life I've been in my head. And I think it grew up me being really great in school and academics because that requires only your mind, right? Like studying and all that stuff. And I think it's just, I've trained myself to only rely on my brain. And as I've gotten older, I've become more aware of my soul and that internal GPS, but I don't want to trust it. I only want to trust my brain and what my brain and my ego are telling me, but that soul power is so much stronger, and I'm always leaning towards that. But then it's like my brain pulls me back, and it's like, you need to trust me because you're the one that I've relied on my whole life. You know what I mean? So it's definitely been a journey. For sure. For sure.
So, you sound so much like me, because I think that that's also one of the things that because by no means do I have it all figured out. Like I'm going to continue to evolve for the rest of my life, as we all should.
Yeah.
I just share what has helped me and what I do know. But, as you say this, that's one of the things that has been, my biggest struggle is the overthinking and the being very in my head about things. And one of the things that I always ask, and this is actually one of the things that I learned on my whole self-love journey too, is that my brain always wants to be like, but how?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yes.
Because it wants this like answer, because that's what our brains are meant to do. It's like, it's all numbers and logic, and it has to, 2 + 2 always has to equal 4. It's like, but the soul doesn't work that way. Like it doesn't work based on logic. It doesn't work based on, these formulas and these things that we have to sometimes encounter as humans. But it's so funny because I battle that too with myself as well, where I'm like, okay, let me drop into my body.
Yeah.
And usually what I have found is that the way for me to get out of there is to start feeling versus thinking.
Oh, yes. That is a lot easier said than done, but I agree. That is the way
But how,
out.
right?
Exactly. Like, how do you feel without thinking? Like, it is an endless circle. And like I was telling you before we started this episode, I went to yoga for the first time this morning, and it's for the first time in a couple years. I've been boxing for the past 2 years consistently, but I missed yoga, and my intention for the class was to feel and not think about it. Just feel whatever comes up with no judgment and embrace it and accept it, and not think about the next step. Just allow your body to flow. And it was a little rusty because it's been a while, but it's something, I think that's the path to aligning with your soul, is feeling and trusting. And every morning I write out goals to start my day along with my gratitude list. And one of my goals is I wholeheartedly trust myself and my soul without even having to question it, because I've been in this state for so long of constantly questioning and doubting what my soul wants me to go for, because you come back to the big 3-letter word. How is that possible? Why is that a thing? And it's a journey for sure.
You talked about something very powerful about like doing it without judgment, right? And so many times, like when we keep stopping ourselves because our brain's like, but how, or but whatever, there's a lot of judgment that comes with that, because it's like, well, why can't I just do the thing?
Yes.
One of the things that I found is that so when you have this like internal desire or purpose or whatever it is, right? That's coming from your soul. It was like implanted in you for a reason. But because our brains are wired for safety, anytime that anything feels like it's unsafe or it's a risk, your brain is going to make up all these reasons why you shouldn't.
Yeah.
So anytime that happens, you should always remember just what was the initial excitement, and go back to that, because when you stick to that initial excitement and follow that creates momentum that overpowers the brain's logic.
Okay. And is it easy to say that the more you do that and the more you follow that initial excitement, the more that voice of question and doubt and skepticism will fade away?
I wish it was that easy. Okay, so a couple of things happen. You do get better at it with practice, because it is hard.
Yeah.
obviously if your human self has a whole purpose of keeping you safe and alive, that thing is like, anytime you do anything that feels like it's a risk or feels like it's unsafe based on your beliefs, based on your experience, based on your past, whatever that may be, you are immediately going to send out all these red flags and signals. And your brain is really good at making you think that the reason it's telling you not to do something is valid. Like, for example, in the most basic example, obviously, if you're about to cross the street, your brain's like, there's a car coming, don't do it. Obviously, your brain is like, has a valid point, like, don't
Right.
cross the street. However, it translates that into things like your career and your relationships. And so, say, for example, that you had crossed the street, ignored your brain, and a car hit you, right? God forbid. Your brain would now have a past experience point of when we crossed the street, we got hurt. So we're never going to cross the street again. Because
And
now
that
there's
comes
trauma.
from our human evolution of avoiding pain and seeking pleasure.
Exactly. So that, and it's so funny because I even noticed it. So I have a dog, and I even notice it in the most basic way with like training my dog. Not to say, not to compare us to dogs, but it's very similar.
We're
The way that a
animals.
dog, yeah, the way that a dog reacts, and and the reason I use this example is because it's instinctual. It's like this, it's primed in us. It's like this animalistic, like primal thing that we have for survival, and it's hardwired in there. So when we talk about examples like relationships, if you were hurt in a relationship, it is your brain is going to find logical, valid ways to keep you isolated or to keep you from going out and meeting people because it's not safe. It's not safe to be rejected. It's not safe to be dumped. It's not safe to feel pain. So you avoid the pain by avoiding situations that might lead you to it. And so sometimes you're like, we talk about things like self-sabotage. Like, why am I self-sabotaging myself in a relationship? It's like, no, your brain actually thinks it's protecting you.
Okay.
And if you self-sabotage that relationship, and I put it in quotations because I don't believe in self-sabotage the way that most people do, because self-sabotage makes it sound like you are your own enemy.
It does.
And we're not at all. Like, that's what starts to create these like fragmented bits of ourselves where you can't love yourself if you think you're against yourself. And self-sabotage is a part of contributing to that idea that I must be against myself. How are you going to love yourself that way?
Right.
If you think you're fighting against yourself?
So, Natalie, what are some common signs of someone who maybe is in an old mental pattern that they just cannot get rid of because they think that they're self-sabotaging themselves? What are some examples of self-sabotage, and most importantly, how do we break free from that?
The first thing is always awareness.
Yeah.
So, even when you go to like any like AA meeting or anything, they'll tell you the first step to solving the problem or to healing yourself is accepting that there is a problem, right? This is not to say that you have a problem or you're broken. So if you're listening, I'm not saying you have a problem. I'm saying there are things that you have to be aware of about yourself.
Yeah.
And we spend so much time because we avoid pain. We spend so much time avoiding the things that can heal us, even though they might be painful. So the first step is always awareness, whether it's awareness of the pattern, meaning, if you notice that every time you start dating someone, you create situations for them to cut it off or for you to cut it off, that's a pattern. So, be very aware of your patterns. And then from there, I love that. This is one of the reasons that I love your podcast. It's called Cultivating Curiosity. It's because the second part of that is to get really curious as to why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Because so many times the first thing that happens is you start judging yourself and you start beating yourself up. And again, that's not a doorway to self-love. Like, the moment you're like, oh, I do that every time. Like, I'm never going to find someone. Talking about relationships, that example, like, I'm never going to find someone. I'm going to die alone. Like, and you go down this like rabbit hole of like beating yourself up. You're not going to get to self-love that way.
Yeah.
What you can do on the, to actually really get somewhere with that is to cultivate curiosity of,
Mm-hmm.
why do I do that? Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Like, I'm going to step back, not going to judge myself. Like, there must be a reason why I'm doing that.
Mm-hmm.
The patterns that we have, the patterns that we, even the thought patterns, there is something that they are doing for you. Otherwise, they wouldn't exist.
Absolutely.
So either it's a survival mechanism, either you learned at some point that that was the way to behave in the world, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever that might be. But get awareness is one, and then get really curious as to, okay, why do I do that?
Yeah. And then once you have that curiosity, I think it's maybe easier to let go of something and to let go of an old mind pattern that is just circling in your head, because you know you're aware of it, you know where it's coming from, and you know it's not serving you in any way that's healthy. And that's why something that I do, one of my mantras is, if I have an old mind pattern that surfaces that I know is not healthy for me and it's not helping the situation in any way, what I do is I breathe in and I think to myself, trust, like trust your body, trust your soul and its direction for you, and then release what's not serving you in a healthy way. And I
Mm-hmm.
do that breathing exercise, inhale and exhale, trust and release, about 3 to 5 times. And it instantly distracts your mind, right? I think that's the key when those old mind patterns surface, is to instantly distract your mind and focus on something more positive.
Yeah, and you know, the powerful thing too about that practice is that when you fill yourself up and you're thinking, let me fill myself up with trust,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those patterns are also, we talk about like, when you talk about things like trauma or mental patterns or whatever it is, a lot of it too is habitual. So your body remembers
Mm-hmm.
that feeling, it remembers that, that reaction, your brain does too. So a lot of times it's also the attachment to the feeling and to that physical experience, because when you are in a state of fear or whatever those mental patterns bring up in you, there is a
Mm-hmm.
physical reaction, there is a chemical reaction of hormones that are released.
Mm-hmm.
So your body also memorizes that, and it almost becomes like a pattern. So what I love about what you just explained is that when you breathe in trust,
Mm-hmm.
you're all of a sudden telling your body and like having a different somatic experience of feeling what trust feels like in your body. If you're not used to it, it might be really uncomfortable. Like, oh my God, let me freak out because I don't know
Yeah.
what, this feels weird. I'm not used to trusting. But the more that you put in practice feeling what trust feels like,
Mm-hmm.
feeling what loving yourself feels like, breathing it in, your body gets out of the pattern of feeling what it usually feels or what it's used to feeling.
Yeah. And is that a way, in your opinion, of truly releasing that trauma and that built up energy in your body? Because I am such a strong believer, whatever trauma has happened in someone's life, unless it's dealt with properly and released in a healthy way, it does stay in your body and it does manifest into other forms. And that's something I want to talk on later with releasing emotions. But if it's not dealt with in a healthy way, I know that it can surface in very unhealthy patterns. So, are there any other techniques that we can do on a daily basis when those patterns surface that help us release that trauma that's been stored within the body?
Yes, absolutely. And it's different for everybody, to be honest with you. But the key is, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
processing it out.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're taught, like, from when we're kids, we're taught don't cry. We're
Yep.
taught not to express our emotions, especially if it's in public, because don't throw a tantrum, don't, which I understand. Like, yes, okay, to a certain degree, there are certain things that you need to teach children. But one of the most important things that I think that we don't teach is how to deal with your emotions in a way that doesn't keep them trapped or that doesn't make you avoid them, suppress them, self-medicate. So when we grow up as adults thinking, oh, it's weak to show emotion, or even going back to just our human self, where it's like we avoid pain and seek
Mm-hmm.
pleasure. So there's so many things that are going against us when it comes to emotions,
Yeah.
that we're so used to either, this is why when I first, one of the things that I was doing when I first started working with women was I was doing nutrition coaching, and then I totally shifted from there. But when I was doing nutrition coaching, I had so many women coming to me saying, I don't know how to stop the binging.
Hmm.
And the binging was always a symptom. It's
Mm-hmm.
never the problem. Like you controlling what you eat is not, it doesn't matter, like ultimately.
Yeah.
um, it's that you will have this unhealthy behavior because you have something unprocessed in you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I know the question was, are there ways so that you can process it? Yes. And it's different for everybody because the way you process might be different than the way I process. So I will give you examples of things that people can do, but ultimately, it has to do with facing the thing,
Like
which
everything
is
else, right? You have to
everything else.
face what it is.
Yeah. And so many people either, like I said, they self-medicate, whether it's sex, drugs, alcohol, or they keep themselves super busy. I know a lot of people who like are go, 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 work, 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 be like
Mm-hmm.
super successful because there's something they're avoiding. I know
Mm-hmm.
people who jump into like all these relationships because there's something they're avoiding and they're trying to like fill or like heal themselves by something outside.
Mm-hmm.
So part of processing is facing it. Like there is no way around it. And that's why so many people don't do it because, I've had people who, whether it's because it's not the right time or they're just not ready or it's too heavy to face, they'd rather not. And, that's okay. You will know when the time is, but whatever emotion has been in there, whatever trauma, whatever it is that you're avoiding, it is time to face it because you cannot become the person that you're meant to be if you have that holding you back.
What if you don't, what if you know, okay, something is obviously there that I haven't processed yet, and it's continuing to surface in multiple symptoms, but you don't know exactly where it's stemming from?
So, what I find most often is that the don't know comes from the brain.
Yeah. Okay.
It comes from logical people like us.
Like me. Go ahead and say it,
Yeah,
girl.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, no. It's because that's me too, girl. Like I've
Yeah.
struggled with that for so long where it's like
Yeah.
my brain's like, "Oh, but I don't know." And the problem too is that then your brain is like, "Well, does that make sense?"
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like
Mm-hmm.
you could be looking inside and you're like, "Okay, what things do I need to face that are tripping me up?" And it's like, "Okay, well, I remember when I was 5 and my mom like left me alone, whatever." Just an example.
Yeah.
And your brain will go, "But is that really it?"
Mm-hmm.
And because your brain is getting involved, it's not letting you feel if
Mm.
that's really it. Like, because you will have a feeling experience in your body. And you also know when you're thinking too much about it because you're trying to make it fit in this world of logic.
Yeah.
And that's not how our feelings operate. That's not how trauma operates. That's not how our soul operates.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's no logic,
Mm-hmm.
especially because most of the patterns that we have now and most of the things that we're dealing with now were happened to us at some point from 0 to 13, the majority of it,
Mm-hmm.
unless you had some traumatic experience later in life. Most of it happened. So we're like really kids walking around in adult bodies with all these like things that we may not know how to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, there's a couple of things there which is this could be a whole other conversation about like inner child.
Oh, yeah.
But but the don't know really comes from
Doubting
your brain
yourself.
trying to, yeah, from and doubting that you can find the answer.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this. If you don't know, who's going to know where it came from?
Right. Exactly. I don't know because you're the only person that knows, right?
Right. Like you can go to therapy, you can go to do all these healing modalities, you can go on retreats, which, we talked about. I went to Bali
Yeah.
thinking I was going to go find myself, thinking they have the answer. Bali has
Mm-hmm.
the answer.
Mm-hmm.
The course facilitator has the answer. This course over here has the answer. It's like, no, you always come back to nobody is going to know you better than you if you take the time to deal with all this stuff
It's so true.
and to look within and to sit with yourself. But it's uncomfortable to sit with yourself. So people don't do it.
Do you find that those answers and that clarity surfaces when you're in meditation or in stillness? Because that's a new practice that because I'm in my head all the time, I have to literally schedule out my calendar. Okay, this 15 minutes, you're going to not think and you're just going to focus on breath work and be still with yourself. And I have heard so many times that clarity and intense emotion surfaces in those moments of stillness when you aren't bombarded with thoughts. Is that a healthy way to go about, I guess, not being doubted by your mind and logic?
I will always 1,000, actually 1,000's even underestimating it, but I will always 1,000,000% like recommend slowing down.
Yeah.
Whether that is meditating, whether that is, and it's not so much for clarity. So what I find that happens when you have, and this is something that I actually always tell my clients, even if you can, I work with clients sometimes that are really busy, that are moms. Like I have a mom of 3, I have a mom of 1 who works full time. Like it's just, they have a lot going on. And I understand that people often think, I don't have time to meditate. The problem with that is that then you are always pulled into doing instead of being.
And feeling.
Yeah. So if you can find, I really start, no joke, with 2 minutes a day to sit down. And the reason for that is because habits aren't built. Like if I were to tell my clients, you have to meditate 30 minutes a day, every day, and then come back and report to me. Like it's overwhelming when you've never even sat with yourself.
Yeah.
Because I know how uncomfortable it is. 1 minute seems like the longest minute because you're thinking, I should be doing something else. And why am I sitting here? And oh, there's that thought again. And oh, I have to do this tomorrow. And in 1 minute, like if you just observe the thoughts that you have, like it's insane.
Absolutely.
So it's not realistic for me to say to someone who has never sat with themselves in their life to be like, meditate for 30 minutes a day. I will absolutely say that one of the things you get out of it is to teach your brain that you don't always have to react to the thoughts and to slow it down, to let it know that it doesn't always have to be doing something. The clarity thing, it can come during meditation, and clarity can come from you slowing down, and clarity can come from you not being so reactive to your thoughts. So it's a great practice. However, I find personally, and in just with experiences with clients, that clarity actually comes from a couple of things, which is action. And the reason for that is because anytime that you're locked in thinking, it stops you from acting.
Yeah.
It stops you from doing. So if there's something that you want to achieve, do, be, have a goal, whatever it is, and you're like, oh, but no, because I'm not going to be good at it. Oh, but no, because I don't know how to do that. Oh, because I don't have the time to start it. You are not going to have clarity on how to do the thing if you don't start it.
I believe that. Actions speak louder than words.
Yes. So action is huge. I do think meditation is a part of that because it allows you to quiet the noise that's preventing you from getting to the clarity. But I do think it's like a multi-approach thing. I think it's a misconception to think that you can sit down every day in meditation, and because I think this is what people expect. People expect to be enlightened, or people expect to, and meditation. Oh, the other thing people expect is to not have thoughts, which is part of being enlightened.
Yeah.
And that's not what happens with meditation. Meditation helps you to be more at peace, be more centered, slow your thoughts down, be more calm, like observe your thoughts more. And it also helps you learn a lot about yourself, because when you're sitting, you start to see all the things that you don't see when you're going 1,000,000 miles an hour during the day.
Yeah.
And that is a huge part of, getting to clarity. But I think meditation just does so much more in your life that you're not going to necessarily experience in one meditation, if that makes sense. I think it's more of a cumulative effect.
Okay. That does make sense. Natalie, I want to touch on a quote off of your Instagram. Like I could have literally spent hours on your Instagram feed because, like I said earlier, you are so vulnerable and real. And I think that's amazing because it makes me feel so connected to you. And I know it's helping in so many other women. And I was relating to every single caption and post that you were saying. And there was one in particular that I really resonated with on this particular day. And the caption was, Overthinking kills. So we've got a theme going here.
Yes,
So
we do.
you say overthinking kills. It kills dreams, momentum, joy, souls. Slow down. Your thought patterns are a habit. You're used to thinking this way, but with practice and daily rituals, you can shift it. Practice feeling into your body versus being stuck in your headspace. This is why having a daily practice that helps you slow down, feel, observe, and process is so important. Without it, you'll be stuck overthinking, not knowing, feeling lost and disconnected, and looking for something outside yourself to fix whatever is wrong. You're not broken, but what you're looking for is within if you reconnect with your soul. And this really sums.
I wrote that.
You wrote that, girlfriend. It is gorgeous.
It's so funny. It's so different hearing somebody else read it, but yes, I did write that.
It's beautiful, and it sums up perfectly what we've been talking about. And I think that is the gateway to aligning with your soul. I mean, I think that is such an ambitious thing to say, like align with your soul, but with practice and with intuition and with a lot of practice and time and patience, you can align with your soul. And I want to know, because you've obviously been through a very big growth journey and you are more aligned with your soul now than you have ever been. What is it like comparing yourself now versus back when you were lost and confused? What is it like aligning with your soul and being aligned with your soul's purpose and mission in life? And is that something that one day it clicks in your head and you're like, wow, this is it. This is what I was put on this earth to do. Or is it something that you have to maintain?
So there's a lot of answers to that. Yes, it is something you have to maintain. Absolutely. Like there is no point that you get to and you're just like, oh, I'm here. Like, and I don't ever have to do anything again. And I used to think like that. I used to think like, especially when we talk about like body image and things like that, I used to think like, this is going to be the diet. Like that's going to be the end all be all. And I'm just going to be on this diet forever and I'm going to have like an amazing body. And it's so interesting because again, I used to think that with like programs and all these things. And I never realized that what it is you daily connecting with yourself and getting to know yourself so well and accepting yourself that nobody can use anything against you. Like so many times we get offended by, something somebody told us or whatever. The reality is that that was just a trigger for something inside of us that needs to heal that we already thought about ourselves.
Yeah.
So unless you're doing the work daily to maintain that connection with yourself and that connection to your worthiness, because again, we place so much worthiness or we place our worth rather on how we look or our job or our career title or whatever achievement or personality or whatever it is that you place your worth on that we all do as human beings, to where we're not connected to where it really comes from.
Yeah.
And it is this amazing soul that cannot be hurt, changed, like nothing can ever happen to your soul. That's amazing. Like your soul has and will always be exactly what it is, as worthy as it was from the day you were born. But if you don't maintain it, meaning daily, and again, this looks different for different people, like the processing, the connecting to your soul, because I find that meditation might work for some people if you do it daily, while like having intuitive dance parties works for other people, while having, while journaling works for others, while card pulling works for others. Whatever it is that gets you to spend time with yourself daily in a way that is intentional and in a way that gets you to know the parts of yourself that you've been avoiding. And also process them, because what we talked about earlier was like, you have to process them. It's like, you have to face them. You have to accept them. One of the hardest things that I realized was, okay, so I looked at the parts of me that were sad or felt insecure or whatever. And then I asked myself, okay, why? It's almost like having a conversation with multiple personalities.
Yeah.
which I've learned that it's okay to talk to yourself. So many people tell you like, oh, if you're crazy, if you talk to yourself. No, people underestimate how much you should talk to yourself.
Yeah.
Because now what I find is that the more that I do this work, because I still do it, I still connect with myself daily. I still have things that come up that need healing. I still have triggers. I still have, nobody's perfect. But what I find is that now I relate to myself so different than that person was when I felt it was. I'll explain it this way because you asked like what was different or what's different from that girl that was like lost in all of these things.
Yeah.
I used to get lost in confusion and stuck so easily.
Yeah.
Like something would happen and I'd be like, well, maybe I shouldn't do that because,
Mm-hmm.
it's not meant for me. And then I would just stop completely until I found the momentum again later.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens now is that I'm so curious about like, okay, why do you think you can't do it?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you doubting yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you feel good enough? Why
Mm-hmm.
like so now it's not so much that those things don't come up for me. It's that I relate to myself differently. I
Okay.
have compassion for those parts of me, even like the ugly parts. Like we all have light and dark. We all
Mm-hmm.
have things that we wish people wouldn't see about us, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I talk to those parts of me. Like whenever I have guilt come up or whenever I have, anything come up in my relationship with my husband or whatever, like I ask myself, like, okay, well, why did you do that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, because felt, I don't know, I felt I needed attention at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, why did you need attention? And is there something I could do for myself that would satisfy that need without having to act in ways that I don't want to be acting?
Yeah, it sounds like you're more comfortable in your own skin with exploring your mind and your thought process, where I think that's so scary for so many people. And that's why they just push it under the rug and don't want to deal with it. And it seems like when you're aligned with your soul, you aren't afraid to deal with those scary thoughts and questions.
Yes, and you know why? It's because I realized I used to be so hard on myself because I love being kind to people and I love being nice to people.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to think, up until actually recently, I was like, maybe that's like I used to think that if I had a bad thought about somebody or if I had like that made me a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would beat myself up because I'm like, I'm a bad person. I'm a horrible person. I feel bad. And I
Mm-hmm.
used to make myself feel so bad about things. And then I thought, you know what? Everybody has crappy thoughts sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Like everybody. It's just that we're not walking around talking the way that our brain really is operating.
Yeah, thank God, right?
Yeah. So I think what people think and the reason they're so afraid is one, they're afraid of what they're going to find.
Yes.
And two, they're afraid that nobody else is that, I'm a bad person for thinking this or nobody else is thinking this way. Something's wrong with
Yeah.
me.
Mm-hmm.
What is wrong with you? I guarantee you that if Sabrina and I sat here and talked about every negative thought we've ever had in life, like you'd be like, oh crap, I'm not, I'm not
Yeah.
alone
Yeah.
because we all have thought. And even I'll tell you, even with my pregnancy, I'll tell you one of the like really dark thoughts I've had just because in the spirit of being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And I like people to understand, like, you are not your brain.
Yeah.
This is why it's so important to connect with your soul because that is your true essence.
Mm-hmm. Your
Like,
brain is just a symptom and a side effect of the human body.
yeah, and your brain is just a tool that was meant to help you figure things out and to survive.
Yeah.
That's it. And now it's like overpowered things to where we're confused, right?
Yeah.
So really your soul is where it's at. Like that's where you should be connected. But I'll tell you one of the dark thoughts that I've had since I've been pregnant, because oh my gosh, Lord knows you think of all these things the moment you're going to have a child.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I thought, because I've dealt with things like depression before, I've gotten totally
Mm.
freaked out about postpartum, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I've had these thoughts where like, okay, well, I know I'm going to be exhausted. I know I'm not going to sleep. And what if the baby won't stop crying? And what if I shake the baby? And like, what if I
Mm.
end up like doing something really harmful to my baby because I'm just so, I've had these thoughts, mind
Mm-hmm.
you. I would never want to hurt my child
Of course
ever in
not.
life. Like, so the reason I share that thought is because our brain has this tendency to like freak us out
Mm-hmm.
about things that either it sees as a possibility in its realm of like keeping you safe or like avoiding pleasure, seeking pain. Like, but it's wired in a way where you can't even blame yourself for your thoughts. Like, you really can't.
Yeah.
Now, what you can blame yourself is if you don't do anything about the way you feel about your thoughts.
Hmm. Do you mind elaborate
But
on that a little bit?
yeah. So for example, if I have a thought every day that I'm not good enough, or if I have a thought every day that, I suck as a human being, and it
Mm-hmm.
makes me feel like crap, and I don't do anything about that, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean by that is something you can do about that is get curious and say, wait, what part of me feels like I suck as a human being?
Mm-hmm.
What part of me feels that I'm not good enough?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, you're not going to get the answer usually on the first try
Yeah.
because your brain will get involved
Mm-hmm.
and say, well, I don't know. I don't know why that is. I just do.
Mm-hmm.
Keep asking. I read, and I wish I remembered who said this, but I remember somebody saying, and it's some author that said that the first time you ask yourself a question, you're going to get a superficial answer. But the more you ask yourself a question, your brain in the background, because this is what brains do, it will look for an answer.
Hmm.
And it will, the more you ask yourself that question, it's like you're giving your brain and your subconscious homework to look for this answer. And
Mm-hmm.
eventually it will.
Interesting. I like that.
Eventually it will. Eventually you will get there. But you have to keep asking and you have to keep spending that time with yourself to know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, that's what you do about it. You don't just let the thoughts sit there and fester and create these negative emotions that then impact your life in these negative ways. And then you're lost and feel like crap.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it's your obligation to be like, okay, I'm not going to judge myself. Everybody has crazy thoughts. Why am I having the crazy thoughts?
Yeah.
Okay, well, in my situation, for example, with, being a first time mom, it's like, well, I've never been a mom. I know that I've dealt with like depression and things like that before, so valid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then I also know that I have no idea what to expect. So these
Mm-hmm.
are valid fears.
Yeah.
Okay, so part of me is scared.
Yeah.
Cool. What would make me feel better? Well, knowing that I can ask for support if I need it,
Mm-hmm.
setting things in place so that, I feel comfortable asking, my husband or family or whatever, like asking for help. Um, Knowing that if I feel something, I need to say it
Mm-hmm.
because I already have these fears or these concerns, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then it's like, okay, I'll know what to do if I feel overwhelmed.
Yeah. It's like
Cool.
decatastrophizing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
so easy to build something up in your mind to make it seem like it's an absolute catastrophe. And it really is helpful to ask yourself those questions and to bring yourself down to earth a little bit and say, okay, God forbid this does happen. Like, what is the likelihood scale from 1 to 10 that this will happen, first of all? But then if it does happen, how will I cope with it? I will ask for
Yes.
support. I will do this. I will do that. And it really makes everything seem more doable and less scary.
Yes. And even talking about, career options or jobs or purpose or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
people get so scared of like, oh, but what if, I have clients who want to start their own business and they're like, oh, but I don't know if I should because what if it doesn't work out?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What if it doesn't work out?
Yeah.
What are you going to do then?
What's the worst that's going to happen?
Well, yeah, like, oh, well, I don't know. Okay, well, do you trust yourself to figure it out? Because I've always said, like, personally, for example, if worse came to worse, and if I could not, for whatever reason, put food on the table, I would go work at McDonald's. I would go work at
Mm-hmm.
Starbucks. I would go work if I needed to, meaning my survival and my family's survival and our well-being is so important that I would figure it out.
Exactly.
And I think that people underestimate their capacity to figure it out if
Yeah.
it doesn't go as planned.
Exactly.
So what we have to get comfortable with is if it doesn't go as planned, can
Mm-hmm.
you be comfortable with that? And then from that point, decide like, I'm still going to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
I'm not just going to curl up in a ball and get in my bed and just
Mm-hmm.
be like, oh, well, that didn't work out. And I just, well, I don't know what to do anymore.
Life is over.
Yeah, because it's never over. And I think
No.
we forget. And if we were to look back at our lives and think how many times we've done things that we thought weren't going to work out, or
Mm-hmm.
how many times we've overcome things, but we never take the time to give ourselves credit for that
Yeah.
stuff. Our brain literally just thinks about like worst case scenario. It doesn't think of like, hey, but remember how amazing you are because you overcame that obstacle that one time? That means we could overcome other obstacles.
Exactly. Which, back to what I was saying in the beginning of the episode, like, do not be scared of those challenges and those risks and those obstacles that present themselves in your life, because when you overcome them, it'll make you even stronger for the next time something scary happens in your life. And you'll remember, wow, I did it once, I can do it again.
Yes.
Wow.
And you asked also earlier, I remember saying, you said something of like, talking about maintenance, or if there's ever a point that you get to where it's just, all figured out.
Yeah.
The thing that happens is that every time you're going to the next level of your life, you're going to have fears. You're going to have things that distract you or that make you feel confused or lost or stuck. It's not, the goal here is never to like not have the thoughts, not have the patterns, not have the, self-sabotage or whatever it is. The goal is to know how to respond.
Yeah.
And if you're anchored in your soul, which is your internal navigation system, cool. Okay, soul, how do we respond to this?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, how do we respond to that? Okay, because you have to know that that divine part of you, it's not going to lead you astray. Like, even if it's perceived that way, if it led you somewhere and you're like, man, well, this relationship didn't work or this business failed, guaranteed that that was part of your journey for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that
Guaranteed.
point where you have to just surrender to that soul's direction and trust it, even though logically it might not make sense and you want to question the heck out of it. You have to just trust that soul's direction. Oh my gosh.
And also, just real quick, when you talk about your brain being like, oh, questioning everything, that's also a pattern that you could just be aware of and say, okay, I know this is my brain questioning, but I'm going to focus on how I feel, and I'm going to focus on my body and my soul. Like, okay, soul, where do you want me to go? Okay, I know my brain's going to object to this, but we're going to keep moving right along.
Yes. Oh, Natalie, I needed to hear that. I feel like our conversation today was a mix of like therapy / like digging into the soul and life's biggest questions. And I love having conversations like this. And I'm so happy that we were able to talk about this, because it not only helped me, it absolutely helped me today and just make me feel more at peace. But I know it's going to touch so many other people's lives. So Natalie, thank you so much again for spending your day with us today. And I know that so many people will want to look you up afterwards and reach out to you and talk to you themselves. So can you give us a little brief description on like what FitSoul is, who it caters towards, and how people can reach out to you?
Absolutely. I created FitSoul to help women, and it's one-on-one coaching where I work with women specifically to get out of their own way. Originally, it started off as nutrition coaching, and I realized that telling somebody what to eat and counting their macros when they weren't dealing with the internal stuff was not the way to help somebody at all. So within FitSoul, I created a program. It's a 3-month coaching program, and after that, I offer like month to month. But the whole idea is that within those 3 months, we get you really intimate with your beliefs, your patterns, your habits. If you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling disconnected, I don't know what I should be doing, I feel so lost. It's also for the woman who has tried everything and still feels like she does not have a sense of self-love or self-worth, because again, it's not out there. So what I teach women to do is I give them the tools, because it's not me telling you what you should do. It's actually me guiding you back to yourself.
I like
and
that.
You are the one that has the answers. So I honestly look at my program as, and this is not like to talk myself up, but because I've taken so many, I look at my program as the one thing that's going to give you the tools so that you don't keep thinking your answer is out there. And I understand, because I've had people be like, well, if you're telling me the answer is not out there, well, why should I sign up for your program? It's like, I get it. But if you're, and I'm by no means do people have to sign up with me, but I strongly feel that when you have the accountability and the structure and the guidance to actually create the rituals to connect with yourself daily and to create a pattern out of that, then after 3 months, and this is why my program is 3 months, because it takes that amount of time to shift your habits and to really be aware. But yeah, it's a 3-month coaching program where we do weekly calls. I give homework and accountability, and they have access to me all the time
Okay.
to just reach out whenever they're going through something. But the whole idea is like I bring you back to yourself so that you know that you do have the answers.
Mm-hmm.
You do have the answers, and you can live the life that you want if you remove this idea of self-sabotage.
I love that. It all starts within.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Natalie. And I have one more
Thank
question
you.
before we say goodbye, unfortunately. But the name of my show is Cultivating Curiosity. And you
Mhm.
mentioned it before. We need to get curious about why we think the way we do. But I'm curious to how you cultivate curiosity in your everyday life, whether it's personal or professional or a mix of both.
So it's both. I feel that one of the biggest ways that I cultivate curiosity in my life is by continuing to ask myself why I operate the way that I do. Because my goal
Mm,
is always to be the best version of myself.
yeah.
And unless I really stop and ask myself, why did I do that? Like, I don't want to be operating off of like the unconscious part of my brain. Like,
Yeah.
I want to know why I'm doing the things that I'm doing and know if they're serving me, you know?
Yeah.
So I honestly have so many conversations with myself of like, why'd you do that? Why? So
Mm-hmm.
that's one part of the curiosity on a personal level. And even in relationships, like I think this is why I've grown so much, like even in a relationship with my husband, because versus like past relationships, because I ask myself, like, who do I want to be in this relationship? And why did I do that? Like, was I being manipulative? Was I like trying to get
Mm-hmm.
attention? Was I so that's one way. And in a professional sense, I feel like my goal is to help as many women as possible at the deepest level. Like, I'm not about like that superficial, yeah, just say affirmations to yourself type stuff. If you ever just have an encounter with me, have an interaction with me, work with me, I want your life to be different after. So I work really hard to like educate myself. I read a lot. I read on like how the brain works and science behind it. And so in terms of professional, I cultivate curiosity, just learning as much as I can because this stuff excites me, like the soul, like spiritual stuff, all
Mm-hmm.
of that. So I feel like I just really never stop learning in that aspect.
I love that. I am right there with you, sister.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Natalie, thank you so much again. You are
Thank
such a light in
you.
this world. Thank you so much. And good luck being a new mama. You're going to do so great. I'm so happy for you.
Girl, I'm so scared.
No,
But thank you.
you're so
But I hear
welcome.
that it's a good thing to be scared. Okay, but
Absolutely.
thank you
I
so
think it
much.
would be concerning if you weren't scared to have your first child.
It's like, no,
So,
I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna be
exactly.
so good.
No, you're going to do great though.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's been honestly such a joy to talk to you.
Oh, thank you, Natalie.